Okay, we will go ahead and get going. Thank you all so much for joining us today to learn a little bit more about the Inflation Reduction Act. My name is Zach Miller, and I am the program coordinator at Most Policy Initiative. Most Policy Initiative is a nonpartisan nonprofit whose mission is to promote long-term health, sustainability, and economic growth for all Missourians by connecting science and policy at local and state levels. We are not an advocacy group, so we don't make recommendations, policy recommendations. We just provide evidence that might be useful for making decisions. So in addition to helping the General Assembly, the legislators in Jeff City make decisions and helping them with their research, we also host these monthly roundtable events. And our goals for these events are to introduce relevant topics from multiple disciplinary perspectives. So we try to bring in researchers and community practitioners, people who are on the ground doing work, and people who are in one way or another engaged in the policy making for that topic. We also have a goal of giving participants new tools and resources for engaging in evidence-based decision-making and policy-making. So as a follow-up to this call, we will send out some resources to everyone and some summaries of what gets discussed today. So you can be on the lookout for that. And then lastly, we hope to use these roundtables to facilitate new connections, primarily between Most Policy Initiative, WashU, the researchers and community partners, the attendees who come. We think it's important for everybody to know the lay of the land, who's out there and who's engaging in what kinds of work, so that we can all help make Missouri a better place. So today we are co-hosting this roundtable with the WashU Climate Change Program. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Alex to introduce the program.
Hi, yes. So Washington University Climate Change Program draws together faculty, students, administrators, and community members across disciplines to develop collaboration, to promote climate action, and to serve as an interdisciplinary resource for climate research and curriculum. And we're really happy to be co-hosting this event today. So thank you, Zach. I want to start with a land acknowledgement. I'm speaking today from Washington University in St. Louis, which is located on the ancestral lands of the Osage, Missouri, and Ohlone people who were removed unjustly. We in this community are beneficiaries of that removal, and we honor them as we live and work here in St. Louis. And Indigenous peoples have inhabited Missouri as a state since time immemorial. Well, before it was a state, this land. And today there are over 183,400 Native Americans living across Missouri. Today, for this panel, WashU Climate Change Program has brought with us two amazing climate associates, two undergrads from WashU who are going to moderate our panel. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Ginter and Madison, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Alex. So my name is Ginter Damavog, and I'm a climate associate at the Washington University Climate Change Program. I am a third year studying chemical engineering in WashU, and I'm from Brazil.
And my name is Madison. I'm also a third year at WashU and a climate associate with Gunter. And I'm studying women, gender, and sexuality studies with a politics concentration.
Okay, so let's get it started. So today we have four panelists with us in this roundtable, and which one of them is going to have a chance to introduce themselves before we start discussing the Inflation Reduction Act. So first we have Zachary Bowersox.
Hi, yeah, I'm Zach Bowersox. I'm a political science PhD, and I teach in the environmental studies major within our department.
Thank you, Zach. Then we have Josh Campbell.
Hi, good afternoon. Josh Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of the Missouri Energy Initiative, a Missouri-based 501c3, and we also administer 3 different property assessed clean energy districts, which help finance clean energy projects in Missouri.
Thank you, Josh. Then we have Nate Goodrich.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Nate Goodrich. I'm the Assistant State Conservationist for Partnerships with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, located at our state office in Columbia, Missouri. And part of the IRA we're delivering is the financial assistance that's coming to the ag producers here in the state. So we'll get into that here shortly. Thank you.
And lastly, we have Mandy LaBriere.
Yeah, hi, Mandy LaBriere. I'm Director of Sustainability for St. Louis County. I oversee environmental, economic, and social sustainability and resiliency initiatives for the county, and I'm focused on identifying resources like the IRA, funding opportunities for St. Louis County, and just want to thank Ginter for the invitation to participate today.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. We're so happy to have you here. And so getting into questions, we're going to have some targeted questions towards our panelists. So the first question we have here is for Zach. So we're wondering, could you provide an overview of the IRA as a policy and explain how money will be distributed throughout the state? And are there any stipulations on how the state uses or allocates the funding?
Yeah, absolutely. So the IRA is first and foremost not an environmental policy. It is a tax policy meant to increase the amount of money the federal government has that it can spend in such a way that it will reduce sort of the effects of economic inflation that we experience. The way it proposes to do that is primarily through corporate taxes and a surcharge on stock buybacks. The minimum 15% corporate tax is going to be targeted to $1 billion earners. So large firms, large companies that make $1 billion in a year. And then that, with this dollar surcharge and some loophole closing in the tax code, is meant to generate about $740 billion. That money will then be spent, part of it to reduce the deficit, another part to reduce like drug prices and continue ACA expansion. And then about $340 billion worth will be available for clean energy initiatives and other sort of Biden administration plans to help us reduce emissions and meet our Paris NDCs. The way we'll get the money, Missouri, the state will get the money, is through a number of different programs. Some of them I imagine we're going to talk about specifically as the roundtable goes on. The quickest, or I guess most direct way the money would hit the state would be through existing programs. So if you noticed, like a month ago, MoDOT had reevaluated its financial statement for its EV charging expansion plan. That had started under the infrastructure bill. It was an existing program. With additional funds potentially available through this, MoDOT could reevaluate its financial expectations and seek to get some of those funds and spend it that way. There are other programs, new programs, and new opportunities the state and its agencies could apply for, seek to get that money. But the other way, and maybe the most impactful way the money hits the state is when we, individuals, buy EVs, further insulate our homes, do other things just ourselves to reduce our energy consumption or make it more efficient. And then we can apply for tax rebates after we do that and take advantage of this program individually or on a household level.
Thank you, Zach. That was definitely a great introduction to the topic. Our next question goes to Mandy, and it is, what roles does the federal investment, like the IRA, play in climate change initiatives that advance sustainability and resilience in cities and urban areas?
Yeah, thanks, Ginter. So I think it plays 3 roles. First, it really has fostered awareness around sustainability and resiliency issues, those issues at local government and state level that are affected by climate change, because there's been a large emphasis on climate change focus in the bill. While there's a greater focus on energy at large, the IRA has also brought, other issues related to housing, manufacturing security, along homeland security and land use into the sustainability and resiliency focus. So that's something, that kind of awareness and publicity has really, I think, educated folks on these issues. Second, investments like the IRA are incredibly important to local government because they kickstart financing and sustainability resiliency projects and programs really by emphasizing several different things. One explicitly, right, is the areas of need, such as deteriorated and environmentally damaged land and disinvested infrastructure. Much of which is a result of deferred maintenance and allows the opportunity for local governments and even the private sector to focus on scaling up capital improvements. And then I would say third, around that private sector focus, it really accelerates the growth. And Dr. Bowersox hit on this because this is it's a tax policy. It's not an environmental bill. That it focuses and directs industry to also concentrate on those same areas of disinvestment and deterioration, and that just accelerates the private market around sustainability and resiliency goods and services. So I think it's about educating on the issues, kickstarting deferred maintenance and capital improvements and local government and state government projects, and that's done by private market growth.
Thank you for that, Mandy. I think that's a great way to frame our discussion. You gave some great information there. The next question we have is for Josh. So what are the key ways that you expect the Inflation Reduction Act to impact the energy sector in Missouri?
I guess I would start with first and foremost is that we're not 100% sure. There's a lot of stuff that has to be determined yet. A lot of people on this call and otherwise have to engage. The state has to engage to request these funds, other parties do, and then how they request those and the programs they develop or apply those funds to will make all the difference. And so we can talk about what we think will happen, but it really comes down to, I think for the greatest impact is really what those programs do. In general, though, as not to repeat too much, I think the biggest impact is the extension of the tax credits in a variety of different sectors. Solar, EVs, etc. This extension, I think, will continue to drive the market that we currently have. One big thing that we have been working on, and I know a number of other folks on this call have as well, is the funding that will be allocated for a potential green and infrastructure bank in Missouri. Now, again, that is the value of that is really going to be determined on how you outline where those funds go, the programs, the type of products, buildings, etc. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon your perspective, Missouri is not in a lack of need or opportunity, we want to look at it positively, for where those funds can go. We've had a number of conversations, whether you look at small commercial projects, rural communities who are not currently benefited by the Missouri Energy Efficiency Act, that those residential properties could access this. When you look at multifamily, or just within the city of St. Louis and Kansas City, who through their building energy exchange programs are looking to increase building performance standards. So those are a number of things, and it's there's a lot of gray areas, but I think the biggest is going to be in the tax extension, with some opportunities with funding going to demonstration projects, as long as we have companies who can come up with the other half of the money, which unfortunately is always the problem.
Thank you, Josh. It's always good to hear from the energy sector and how the IRA can impact it. But our next question now, it's for Nate, and it's about what are the key ways that you, Nate, expects that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to impact agriculture, forestry, and land use in Missouri?
As part of the IRA, I guess USDA at the department level is expected to receive about $40 billion, of which that 40 billion, about half or 19.5 billion will be going directly to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or the agency that I work for here in Missouri at the national level, or further implementation of our, what we call our Farm Bill programs, with the direct focus on climate smart agriculture and forestry practices. We have a list of practices that have been determined to mitigate climate change, and that's where we're going to direct those dollars towards through our existing Farm Bill programs. So Missouri NRCS has successfully delivered and implemented the Farm Bill in the past. We are generally among the top 5 states in the nation as far as dollars allocated to our producers here in the state for financial assistance for implementing different conservation practices through those programs. But we always have a higher demand for that financial assistance than we have dollars to meet that. So our programs, those Farm Bill programs, are indeed competitive, and they're based on a ranking score that a producer's application is ranked on based upon the direct impact on the environmental benefits associated with what those farmers, ranchers, or forest landowners are wanting to do on their property. So with the IRA funds that are coming our direction as part of that $19.5 billion, we'll be able to continue to work with some of our current customers, work with some new customers. We're going to be working both with large scale and small scale producers, urban and rural, all different land uses, with the common goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and storage of carbon, whether it be in the soil or forest or plant materials. So this conservation funding that's coming to the state yet this fiscal year 23, which started October 1, that's going to be on top of our existing conservation programs that we've had in the past. So it's going to bring a very significant amount of additional funding available for delivery of our, what we call our voluntary and incentive-based approach to targeted conservation, especially as it relates to climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency for those producers. So I guess bottom line is that funding is the IRA funding will definitely increase the opportunities for our farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners across the state to implement those conservation practices that will definitely benefit them as well as society in general.
Thank you for that, Nate. It's great to hear how the IRAs, how it'll impact all these different sectors. And with that, we're gonna move over to a discussion on the impacts of the IRA as a whole. And so, Zach, what are the long-term effects of policy mechanisms like the IRA?
Yeah, and this will be interesting. Obviously, today is election day. What does the next Congress look like? And what we're talking about today, how many of these things last into the future? We don't know. But what we do know is, Josh already said it, the 10-year extension of the tax credit is pretty substantial. That's not just beyond this Congress, it's beyond 2024. That could give us a chance here in Missouri to take advantage of that. We become sort of attached to or enjoy, maybe we're buying EVs, using more solar electricity. We like that, and then instead of politically advocating maybe a traditional sort of route when it comes to energy policy, we begin advocating for a more green, those green policies. That could be one of the long-term impacts. The other thing is too, we're shaping, an old political science saying is policy creates politics as much as, politics makes policy. So the agencies here in the state that are going to be, adapting some of these practices, that the programs, they want to take advantage of some of this money, they need to pitch a program, some response to the federal government's ask, right, about what they'll do, how they'll implement. If it's the EV charging station expansion, how would Missouri implement that? And they need to be able to design an agency-based response, right? This is how MoDOT will respond, right? And that could create long-term professional pathways within MoDOT that will continue to reinforce the support of EV charging stations, in this example I'm using. But we can expand this to MOAG and some of the other departments that are going to have to shape some sort of program, a response to, right, the federal guidelines as to how you take advantage of this money. And that can absolutely be long-term. That can become maybe not permanent in kind of the outward sense, but certainly within the agency or within the department become a long-term practice or a long-term professional path within that.
Thank you, Zach, for that. I think when something as big as the IRA happens, we always want to know how is it going to play out in the future. And since we're talking about the impacts of the IRA, my next question is to Manji, and it's more specific about the St. Louis County. So what are some of the projects and sectors that you believe will receive IRA fundings in the St. Louis County? Is it going to be used to launch new initiatives or to boost the ones that already existed?
Well, I mean, I would say that let's take it in two parts. I mean, what sectors will receive IR funds? I think obviously government, nonprofit, and private sectors will all receive those dollars. There's been a focus on the municipal and state side. It looks like there's quite a bit of language around public lands and tribal lands that will potentially receive funding. I would say, to Josh's point, we don't yet know, the total impact and the programs that are going to come out of the IRA, but certainly with nonprofits, advocacy around residential programs, and even trade associations around sustainability and resiliency job trainings, I think are a target under this bill. And then when it comes to the private sector, like I said, this really just accelerates, goods and services in the private sector market. And so you look at that, it's going to have an impact on, again, not just energy, which has always been a huge focus of climate change, but transportation, housing, the agriculture component that Nate spoke to. There's some focus on homeland security, natural resource conservation and preservation, and all of that requires planning in advance. And, to much to what Nate was saying about, I apologize, I'm sorry, what Dr. Bowersox was saying about, the EV, infrastructure development for the state. I mean, there has to be a plan in place. And to my knowledge, that the Department of Transportation has moved towards a plan through another grant mechanism. So I think we're going to also see the leverage of prior funding and bipartisan infrastructure legislation that is also going to be supported by our IRA funds. Specifically for the county, again, it's really hard to say. We are moving down a path I'm happy to share today, and I hope that the IRA will be able to bolster this new initiative. We'll be issuing St. Louis County 2050, an equitable and sustainable comprehensive plan in the coming months, hopefully, before the end of the year. And that is to generate recommendations for sustainability and resiliency in our comprehensive planning in traditional comprehensive planning elements of transportation, energy, housing, land use, to drive, land use, infrastructure, and economic development, redevelopments, and revitalization in our communities. And part of what these funds will do, because they extend into 2030, 2031, 2032, is that we will have jumping off points in that comprehensive planning process that hopefully we can elevate projects through the comp plan with these funds to kickstart capital improvements. Second, also, potentially a new initiative and bolstering some existing programs is around workforce development, really driving the equitable and sustainability career path with, a specific focus on technicians, analysts, programmers, engineers, architects, not just the construction jobs in the state. And then, more explicitly, bolstering one of our existing programs that we're getting ready to release. So it's existing to us now, but it will be new to county residency and constituency, is, the county fleet EV transition. We have a goal to transition our fleet by 25% over the next 5 years to electric vehicles. And that includes a number of different things: priority electric vehicle purchasing and operations and maintenance training as a part of that workforce development, so that we are ensuring, the resources, even in our electric vehicles, that are maintained in the county. And so these are all opportunities and examples that the IRA can help bolster for us.
Thank you for that, Mandy. That was really great information there. So for Nate, the Missouri Farm Bureau recently came out against the IRA. So what is the primary reason for their opposition to the legislation? And based on your experience, how do farmers and the farming community feel about the IRA?
Great question, Madison. Appreciate that. I obviously cannot speak on behalf of Missouri Farm Bureau, but what I can say is that Missouri NRCS and the Farm Bureau have a great working relationship. We're in meetings a lot together. We have a lot of discussions, even one-on-one, and we share our common goals related to the prosperity of Missouri's farmers and ranchers, especially as it relates to the conservation title of the Farm Bill. And we've got a lot of feedback and input from them, especially as a member of our state technical committee, which is an advisory committee for our state conservationists on implementation of those Farm Bill programs. So just as kind of an example of that, Missouri's producers, as well as all of our producers across the nation, have experienced a dramatic increase in the fertilizer inputs for the costs of those fertilizer inputs in the recent years, especially this last crop year. So as part of that, through the Inflation Reduction Act funding that's coming to the states for our conservation programs, there's going to be streamlined opportunities for the farmers to address some common goals to improve their nutrient management planning. Meaning that we're going to be putting the right fertilizers in the right place at the right time to help them, reduce the volatilization, the runoff, the leaching of those fertilizers to impact air and water quality, but ultimately to help them with their bottom line as far as profits and costs as it comes into play, the economic side of things, by doing better management of those resources. So that's a real common thread between us and Farm Bureau and a lot of the ag commodity groups out there, is how we can use our programs to help producers, not just economically, but sustainably as far as the resource base goes. Regarding just the farm community in general, I think the IRA investment will, as I said, support those conservation programs that are oversubscribed in the state and across the nation, where we've had producers waiting in line, if you will, for funding opportunities for what they want to do to address some resource concerns on their farms. So that's going to allow them to have a lot more available opportunities there for that needed both technical and financial assistance. It's going to further support the healthier land and water across the state and help improve those farms for the resiliency and adaptation to climate change across operations. Like I said, ultimately support their bottom line on the economic side, as well as, while we're doing that, of course, through the IRA funds, we're also going to be addressing that climate change all along the way. So I haven't heard a lot of comments directly from the farmers out there across the landscape, but I will say, even as recently as yesterday, we had a meeting with some of our crop industry partners just to give them an update on what we do know about the IRA and the opportunities that are coming to the state. And I think it's fair to say that it was met with excitement from them as far as the opportunities that are in front of us.
Thank you, Nate. So, Josh, what does the IRA mean for jobs in the energy sector in Missouri? And as a quick follow-up question, what does it mean for energy prices for consumers?
So I'll go backwards. I personally am not convinced that I think it will reduce the prices of energy. Being a regulated state, a good portion of our prices are determined by the PSC. Our investor-owned utilities, Ameren, Evergy, Liberty, etc., have to go through the Public Service Commission for rate increases and changes, and they have tariffs for solar and renewables as is, and that has to go through as well. There is a growth in Missouri for solar fields, utility scale solar fields, but I don't believe that'll have a direct decrease in it, as we see a transition in Missouri from our coal-based utilities to alternatives. I think depending upon how the Securitization Act is implemented, you actually may see increased prices, but it's really up in the air for now. I haven't looked at that. I think jobs-wise, though, for the IRA, outside of the tax component, I think the second primary purpose of this is to increase jobs in America. When you look at the sourcing requirements for solar, the money going to manufacturing for EVs or advanced industrial facilities, there's significant amount of money going to those areas. And one of those is also for critical minerals, which Missouri is home to a good number of those. So I think in general, the sectors that you can look at, number one is it has components for prevailing wage, apprenticeship programs, domestic content sourcing of anywhere from 40 to 55% for solar. There's more than $10 billion available for related to home energy efficiency, whether that's credits or rebate programs, which can be combined in Missouri with the pay-as-you-save components for the utilities. And I think, as we all know, the number one thing you cannot get rid of is someone to install your HVAC or your roof has to be here. It can't be shipped overseas. So that means it should increase or at least support that network of jobs. And as I had mentioned before, there's a significant amount of money, over north of $5 billion in grants and rebates for iron, steel, concrete, glass, pulp, paper, ceramics, and chemical production. And it is in the purpose of reducing greenhouse gases and finding or increasing local critical mineral development processing facilities, which there are a number in Missouri that are looking to be built in the next couple of years. And then finally, there is also part of the critical minerals is also heat pumps and funding for those. And that's something that is underutilized in Missouri, significantly considering where we are geographically. So I think it, again, outside of the tax side, I think jobs is the second biggest impact that we'll see from this.
Thank you for that, Josh. So with that, we're going to kind of switch gears here a little bit, and we're going to ask some questions from the audience. So any panelists who has anything to say about these questions, feel free to jump in. So the first question we're taking from the audience is, are there any multi-family housing developments that are implementing the Justice 40 part of the IRA in rural and urban communities?
Sorry, muted. That one seems a more direct question toward my role at the county. And I can say that I don't know of any specific developments that are focused on the Justice 40 initiative. What I can say is that the Department of Planning and the county has been following, looking at, and participating in webinars related to the Justice 40 initiative. And that is a focus in the comp plan that we hope to see implemented throughout developments, redevelopments, and as part of revitalization in specific areas in the county. Obviously, disinvested communities where those environmental justice initiatives and Justice 40 initiatives exist. So the short answer is there may be, but there hopefully will definitely be in the future.
I would add that one thing that MEI does is we put on some conferences, and this was a particular topic we were trying to get addressed, but we were unable to find projects in the region. I know Elevate Energy, which is active in Kansas City and St. Louis, has projects nationally, but I'm not sure from talking with them and looking that they have one locally. And I do know that not specific to this project, but under the Justice 40 initiative, Missouri S&T did receive grant dollars under a research project there. I don't have a lot of details other than that's what that occurred.
Thank you for your answers. We're gonna keep going for some questions from the audience, so any panelists can jump into them. But the next question is, are there any international implications for Missouri-specific industries through the IRA?
I guess I can give an answer to this. This is going to be a very narrow one, though. If you look at some of the things, they'll be supported in terms of, Josh was talking about jobs. Some of the jobs we're creating just locally here in St. Louis, there'll be an EV battery facility up and running in 2024, 25, somewhere in there. There'll be, I think, the third largest battery plant in the US. We're still, when it comes to our international place in competing in the creation of ion lithium batteries and exporting them to market and stuff, we're still way far behind. China leads the world in this. We're not, this is a boost to get us closer to competitive. How close, time will tell when we get, like this plant open and other plants open. But we're at a disadvantage just, literally from the ground up. China sits on about, 25% of the global sort of rare earth elements needed in the production of these batteries. And they have the facilities to produce or refine, that is, about 60% of rare earth elements. So from a starting point, a country like China just has the materials right there, and then the secondary industries right there to produce these batteries. So internationally, we'll get closer maybe to competing, at least. Again, this is a sort of narrow answer, get closer to competing on battery production than maybe, exportation of those batteries, but we're still quite a ways off.
If I can add on top of that, we actually are in the midst of finalizing a paper that'll be released December 8th at our conference in St. Louis on energy storage as an economic engine for Missouri. And to Mr. Bauerbach's point, Missouri has a significant number of rare earth minerals. And as I had mentioned before, there is incentive for that. But China is on the record for making sure that the jobs, the processing facilities that were referenced, if they are taken away from China, there will be retribution. So some type of trade war is a possibility for in that realm. But in general, over the last 30 years, the United States has pushed away the manufacturing and the processing of these materials because of the environmental impact and that it's cheaper to operate there. There are some technologies now that allow the processing of these materials here in the United States to be done cleaner and more environmentally friendly. And with that, you can, you reduce the cost of shipping, which is significant both there and back, and keep the minerals here. I think that's beneficial, but this isn't the clean energy revolution, quote unquote, is definitely an international topic to where these resources are not found here. They're found in Asia and Africa and some in South America. And pushing for them definitely will cause us to have to interact with our international partners in a different way.
Thank you for that. So I want to ask a question specifically more geared towards Nate, but anyone feel free to jump in on this. But how will the IRA address equity initiatives within your respective sectors? So for Nate, you have the conservation and all that.
Is that directed towards me, Madison? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay, pretty good. Yeah, the equity initiatives within the forestry and ag sectors as part of the IRA. Yeah, our agency has, I guess you could say, a renewed focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera. And the IRA is going to allow us to expand that, our reach, I guess you could say, to our urban areas, some of those customers we don't traditionally work with. or haven't historically. Also, some of our underserved producers and communities, and we're going to further our efforts, I guess you could say, to engage with our partners to help us provide outreach to make sure that all the farmers and ranchers and forest owners across the state are aware of the opportunities that were available through the IRA, and we have agreements with partners in place right now that are out doing that outreach to those individuals and to those groups. We've also just recently on my staff put on an outreach coordinator, and she's going around to all sorts of events across the state trying to get the word out on the availability of our programs to all of our producers. As our Chief Terry Cosby has often said, the assistance that producers receive shouldn't depend on their zip code, and that's very, very true. So we're trying to get the message out to all those parties that we might be able to assist.
Thank you, Nate. And now if maybe the other panelists could address equity initiatives through the IRA in other sectors, such as local policies or energy.
Sure. I mean, I go back to the county's initiative, which is St. Louis County 2050, an equitable and sustainable comprehensive plan. So our focus is solely on equity and sustainability as a component, a criteria for comprehensive planning for St. Louis County. The county has not issued a comprehensive planning document since 1980. So it's been some time since the county has even looked at what a vision for the future of St. Louis County could potentially look like. And, you know, I'm sure this dates me, but that's my entire lifetime that the county has not issued a comprehensive plan. And thinking about it in that way, of course, you know, there was not electric vehicles. There was the internet was just a twinkle in most programmers' eyes, and it certainly wasn't mainstream. So there's many considerations, you know, modern considerations that we need to think about around comprehensive planning, and more explicitly, you know, what that's going to look like in future years. Like I said, jumping off points at 2030, which is only 8 years away, 2040 and 2050. So while 2050 seems like a very long time, to the point that, you know, Nate, Dr. Bowersox, and Josh have all shared today, each one of them has long-term elements, whether it's mining for, you know, new energy and renewable sources or electric vehicles, whether it's long-term, you know, farming programs that promote equity, both in rural and urban environments, or whether it's, you know, international markets, or potentially, you know, retention and, you know, tourism for international markets here in St. Louis. And so you have to think about equity across all levels, not excluding, you know, North County, North City as a component of revitalization and redevelopment. And so, you know, when we think about it in that context, that's what the county is looking at. We're looking at the overall implications of equity and sustainability from an infrastructure perspective, development, revitalization, to just re-illustrate that, our own county operations, how we can be more equitable and sustainable in county operations, and then out of that, what policies will be equitable and sustainable. And then, you know, I would go so far as to say how we can attract and retain the future talent, residents, and taxpayers in, you know, the St. Louis County region. Because we won't become a more resilient, more sustainable, more constructive county if we don't have those tax dollars to help elevate those projects. So when you think about MOST and its policy initiatives and connecting these panelists and these voices, you know, what are you really driving? You are driving the economics of the region, and it's those voices that will make it more sustainable and resilient in the long run.
On the energy side, I would simply add that, HUD is getting $1 billion in appropriations, focusing on their properties and their communities. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the one through EPA, goes to not only states, but municipalities, tribal governments, nonprofits, and they are also looking at low income and disadvantaged communities. There's a prioritization in a new Clean Jobs Network, specifically again towards low income and disadvantaged communities. There are funds that are based off a census tract for those impacted by coal or job loss or fossil fuel use. So it's both use and production that is going to be there. There's environmental justice funds being provided, block grants for climate, about $3 billion there. There's other things about the clean and heavy duty vehicles, I think, will be available in Missouri as well. So they are trying to tie that in. And there was a question about when we know the money will get here. And part of the reason we don't know where things are going is not all on the shoulders of the state, but the federal government also hasn't developed the parameters on how they're going to determine who gets what money. So, because there's a lot of disadvantaged communities. There's a lot of census tracts impacted by coal use or old plants or lost jobs when we transition to clean energy. So when we look at that, there are clauses that demonstrate that the funds will be released sometime in 2024. That's not all of them, that's some of it. But there's talk about some of it being released, several years after that as well. So, EPA and DOE are working really hard on determining how they are going to make sure this money goes out in an appropriate way, and that we get a lot less news coverage about some, restaurateur getting $8 million like they did under the PPP loan. That, we have to balance out if we want the restaurateur to get the $8 million or take another 6 months to get the money to the right hands. I think that's the unfortunate position that we're in with such a one of the largest releases of funds release, quote unquote, that we've seen.
Yeah, thanks for that, Josh. I should also highlight, Josh reminded me just to share, in a very specific project for the county, as part of the Biden infrastructure legislation, there's been many technical assistance dollars which St. Louis is a priority candidate to receive. And so our Department of Human Services works with HUD and, on a variety of different programs, and they received a climate change technical assistance housing, a climate change housing focused technical assistance grant to help plan for that. So, Josh is right. Some of these funds, we just don't know how they are going to be allocated through specific agency programs. And so we're waiting on that from the federal government. But that's also to say that we're trying to be thoughtful about how we leverage the funds that we've received from bipartisan infrastructure legislation and ARPA to continue to capitalize on all of the federal government investments. I go back to what I said, this just kickstarts these projects for the region. These funds are not the end all be all to complete these projects. It's never enough money. There's always more work and not enough money.
Yes, thank you so much for those answers. And I think that leads in a good way to our next question, which I'm going to open to all panelists, which is, do you have any specific recommendations for how different stakeholders, like community groups, nonprofits across the state, can tap into IRA funds?
Well, I'll say first, if you haven't voted today, go vote. That's the first way to be impactful. Second is, elected officials are in place for a reason. And if you don't have a relationship, haven't talked to or connected with your, local council person, alderman, do that and voice your opinion about where you see these dollars should be spent. But I would say be educated about it, read the act and know, the titles and the subtitles and to the point that, many of us have focused on today on the specifics of what is available in those bills when you do talk to those elected officials.
Do any of the other panelists would want to tap in on maybe how different stakeholders could influence in the IRA?
I don't have anything right now. I wish I did, but I don't.
So one question I want to hop in here, and maybe the better question, or are there specific resources like to pay attention to follow along, or like knowing updates and knowing when disbursement happens and who it goes to? Like, is there a website you guys would point folks to?
Well, any state agency will likely update you on their own programs and their own efforts within that. They usually have like a news board or something like that. Or I don't know if MoDNR still does this, or maybe it was either MoDOT or MoDNR just has a page on the IRA right now you can go to about updates and how it affects them and what programs and stuff they'll be taking advantage of or applying to.
All right.
I did just add the generic link to the Inflation Reduction Act page on the DOE site.
All right. Thank you, Josh. So we've gotten a lot of.
And I was just going to add real quick, you know, for all of the federal agencies, I mean, if you want to be inundated with emails about all things from all federal agencies, by all means, register on their website. You will get daily emails of agency information you probably never wanted to know anything about. No, jokingly, I mean, all kidding aside, they're valuable sources of information from every agency and from the federal government and on down. A lot of the state governments have them as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We have received several questions in the audience. We won't be able to get through them, so I'm just going to do one more question from the audience, and just in the order that it came in, and that is, what can city and county municipalities do to advance building performance, renewable energy, and EV goals? Is there anything you would add to this that we haven't already covered?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think there may be folks on the call that know that, you know, the St. Louis City has a building energy performance standard that, and Josh, you'll have to, help me here. I think it was what, 2-3 years ago that they implemented that. I forget the right date when St. Louis City implemented the building energy performance standard.
Yeah.
But the county is certainly working towards a similar goal. Much of this is dependent on a number of different things. The election, of course, how we are able to proceed, politically with the understanding of the value that the building energy performance standards brings to county buildings. And so part of that is communicating both operationally and politically. So I think, going back to the question about how you can get involved, and when I say that, and having conversations with your county council folks or your aldermen, if you're a supporter of this, then, share that with them and talk to them about the reasons why you're a supporter of BEPS and how it would benefit your community. One of the things and one of the reasons that I'm working in the county is to implement, a full-fledged climate action sustainability plan through our comprehensive planning document. And that's going to include benchmarking and greenhouse gas reductions, other things that the county has not done to date. And so we're working on it. It
Cool.
takes time.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. I look forward to seeing that comprehensive plan. Sounds exciting. So
Yep.
we're getting close to our into the hour mark. So I want to give each panelist a chance to just offer a key takeaway from this roundtable today. So that will just be a 1 or 2 sentence sum up of something that you would like Missourians to know related to our discussions. And Nate, we will start with you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Zach. Yeah, I just want to emphasize that the IRA is bringing an opportunity to deliver voluntary conservation across the landscape, not only in Missouri, but across the nation, like we've never seen. The funding levels that are coming to NRCS to work with producers to put practices on the ground to address climate change are so exciting, and it's just going to increase exponentially through the years of the bill. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nate. And Zach?
Yeah, I would, I guess, just say take advantage, right, of the program. It's there for you. You can get the rebates or the credits, for buying an EV, insulating your house, all of that. So if this is something you want to do, now's the time to maybe do it.
Okay, thank you. Mandy?
Yeah, I would just leave everybody with, the general philosophy that effective policy like the IRA drives effective operations and vice versa. The more effective we are through this policy with our operations, we can start to implement more sustainability and resiliency policy, which is a goal here of most, and I think important critically to all the work that we're doing, all the panelists and everyone on the call. And last but not least, collaboration.
Yeah. And Josh?
I will, two things. One, on the last municipal question, I put in the Building Energy Exchange websites for Kansas City and St. Louis to build off of what Mandy was talking about. But as to this point, again, following up on Mandy, I was just about to say collaboration. This is a really big bite for everybody. If you're an individual, it may be harder, but if you belong to an organization, there is information out there where you can start to collaborate with other organizations to help the Division of Energy and Department of Natural Resources, Department of Ag, and the Department of Transportation make sure that Missouri gets its most amount of money and is used effectively. There are some needs, and if we collaborate and make sure that we're working overall and trying to find someone who can connect those dots across the lines, and maybe that's Division of Energy, but starting to have those conversations now, letting the division know that you're interested, the departments know that you're interested, can keep you in that loop. And when those conversations are had and decisions are made, then you're there. And I think that will provide for more effective use of the funds.
All right, thank you very much, Josh. And so to close things out, I want to first thank our 4 panelists for coming today. It was awesome to have you guys here and to share your to hear about what's going on in your sectors and to listen to your expertise. And then thank you to everyone who came. It's great to see so many people here and so many people interested in and engaged in this topic. We will be sending out a list of resources that the panelists mentioned today, along with a link to this video if you would like to share it after we're done here. And with that, I will conclude this call. And so feel free to hop off if you have somewhere to run, but we will also stick around for another 5 or 10 minutes if anybody wants to have a discussion. So thank you again to everyone. Stay tuned for some resources, and you'll hear from us soon. And if folks do want to have a conversation, I think we can all unmute and talk if folks want to do that. And
this is Linda. I'll ask a question. I typed in a question during the panel and didn't see a response, and I know it was pretty specific. So is anyone doing agrivoltaics in Missouri yet?
Not that I have heard. Yeah, maybe Josh would know more. We of course wrote that community science note last year, which I will send out in the resources as well about this. I haven't heard of anybody implementing it on any larger scales.
You said agrivoltaics?
Yes.
No, not that I'm aware of. The large plants, utility scale plants aren't looking at doing that as far as I know either.
my partner and I have some goats, and we're looking for some grazing opportunities. So that is one of the things that we are thinking about, but our scale is pretty small, so we're not quite ready to reach out to Ameren to see if we can graze on their land. Well, it sounds like, I think we are good. I think we can wrap it up. I appreciate you guys.
Yes, I'm looking to do a demonstration.
I appreciate you guys sticking around, and thank you guys again for coming. We'll send out some emails with resources and links. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zach.
Thanks.
Good seeing everybody.